All right. Let's get this going. What is going on? Festival of Light is Yaakov Lehman, and we are rolling for the Israeli session of the Infinite Light Festival. Big thanks to Erez for putting this global gathering together. My name is Yaakov Lehman. I live in Moshav, Beit Meir, here in Israel, and it is a pleasure to talk to you about something that I am extremely passionate about, which is surfing. No, I'm actually not a surfer, but I'm a cosmic surfer. So, I'm in the idea, and I've been very inspired by the notion of waves. So I've titled this session Surfing the Waves of Innovation, a Kabbalistic Approach to Creativity, Chaos, and the Advancement of Human Civilization. So we've got 30 minutes to dive into all those topics. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, I'm really looking forward. Thank you all for joining us. So here we go. Waves. What is more inspiring than the waves? I was first in Florida about 3 months ago doing some Tai Chi along the cliffs and rocks right up on the Atlantic Ocean. And I was looking at this set after set of waves. And I was thinking, the entire world is waves. It's not just the surfers out there looking for the next break and the next set to drop in, but waves are big. Waves are what power our brains. We've got brain waves that are actually measurable. Different states of consciousness emit different wave frequencies. There are social waves. We talk about social movements or waves of art or third wave, second wave, feminism. There's waves that happen inside human societies and civilization. Political waves, now waves of nationalism, waves of decolonialism, right? Climate waves, right? There's a cold front coming in, and it comes in this wave form. So waves are everywhere. And if we really get to the root of what waves are, it's the long-term ebbs and flows and the peaks and troughs and in general frequencies of the way the world is governed. The entire world is going according to this motif called the wave. So I want to try to understand what waves are, and maybe we can learn a little bit about innovation, how we create with waves, about chaos, how chaos plays a role, that not knowing a chaotic element of innovation, and then talk about how human civilization advanced through waves. So let's again start with the ocean wave. The ocean wave was that first point of inspiration for this talk. So, you know, if you look out at a giant body of water, you don't see the wave except for right up against the shore. But waves are happening, they're traveling through this incredibly immense, deep body of water. And it's these low pulse waves. I mean, sound travels as waves through water, but this energetic notion of the wave pulling from the moon is traveling through the water, and only right when it approaches the shore does part of it ascend up. And if you look, you can start to see the crest, and it's moving along, and then the wave crashes. But let's think about this crest, right? Because we're going to talk about innovation here and about creativity, and we use all this terminology on the cutting edge, um, on the edge of innovation. So if we look at a wave, there is a cutting edge, right? As it approaches shore, you'll see there's one tiny, tiny part of the wave, that crest, that begins going, and I guess you could say it is cresting up above the rest of the wave. So this is like the early adopting piece of system matter that is making itself manifest in this body. That this entire body of water has carried this wave, and now as the shoreline comes up, one part of the water, the top of the iceberg, comes and rises up, picks its head above the rest to say, I am going to be the beginning of this wave. Where does this crest come from, and how did this crest distinguish itself from the rest of the wave, and why it, and who is it? Does it maintain its identity as the wave continues flowing down? These are the questions that I'm curious about. But I want to reframe this piece we can see in the wave motif to the wider discussion of innovation. What does it mean to innovate? What does it mean to be on the crest of a wave, on the crest, on the cutting edge? So if we think about it in human terms, or certainly in Jewish terms, like this is everything. We are created in the image of God. B'Tselem Elokim. Now, what does that mean? It means that we're imbued with the most godly trait there is, which is to create, to be creative, to be innovative, to bring into the world something that wasn't there outside of the system, some new novelty that didn't exist before. That is the most godly trait there is. And we were given that trait. And it's a unique statement that the Jewish people make, is that we are meant to be creators. And our creations are even better than God's creations in a certain way. There's a famous midrash about Rabbi Akiva, a famous Jewish sage, and Turnus Rufus, a Roman general. And Turnus Rufus said, whose creations, whose innovations are better, God's or man's? And Rabbi Akiva said, man's. And he said, man, what are you talking about? So Rabbi Akiva, it says, brought him a sheaf of wheat and a delicious cake. And he's like, which one of these is better? The sheaf of wheat was created by God, but there's a human element that is brought into the world that brings a newness, a new wisdom, a new novelty, that takes that wheat, grinds the seeds into a little pulse, adds water, sugar, if you were like shops in my house, little banana chocolate chip, boom, some yeast, and we've got this cake. And even the blessing that we make on processed wheat flour into cake is a bigger blessing. We make a mizonot or a hamotzi as opposed to a hadama, a lower level blessing that we just make if we're eating raw wheat sheaves out of the ground. So Rabbi Akiva was saying, yo, we are here for a particular reason. God was cool up in the heavens. God is the ultimate creator. But he has this experiment that he had called human beings, these limited, fallible creatures that inhabit the earth, that are imbued with the most godly trait, which is innovation. So our creations, our innovation is here for a reason. We're supposed to create, we're supposed to innovate. And more than that, Jewish wisdom is very explicit that each and every single person, every soul that exists on this planet and beyond the human kingdom, so to speak, and animals and plants, this is brought from Reb Chaim Vital at the beginning of the Eitz Chaim, every single creature, particularly the human species, as we've talked about, is here to manifest a unique contribution to the world. That there is something that each individual created entity is here in his time, in his place, his or her time and place, and they are manifesting into the world something that nobody else can. Nobody else in the entire world. And they're brought here to bring that newness to light. That is how important we view innovation in the Jewish tradition, that every single person is here to offer a unique contribution that never could. In the 5,782 years we've been counting up until this point, until now, there was never the possibility for this unique value add that is being contributed into the world by each and every human being. That's an amazing statement, and that's why the Jewish people hold innovations so big, that we believe that each of our innovations done in an ethical way are here to bring the world to a state of a utopian world vision, that our innovations, our work should shape the world, not just to where we inhabit it, where everything is broken, if you haven't noticed, and messed up and completely shattered. We see this everywhere. That's not the way it's supposed to be. That we're here through our innovation to bring about the world where the prophetic vision is nations will beat their swords into plowshares. We're talking about the end of war, the end of suffering, the end of sickness and malady. That is the mission statement. That is the vision of the Jewish people, to be creative, ethical innovators, to bring about an era where there'll be complete world peace. This is not like a new age concept that we've just adopted. This is thousands of years of Jewish vision and prophecy and mission to be cutting-edge innovators, from Abraham, whose very name, the first Ivri, he stood on the other side. He was willing to face down an entire world who was saying, that's not how we call it. That's not the way it goes down. And Abraham said, no, there's not a moral relativity world. There is an objective truth, and I'm willing to hold myself to that. I'm willing to have that integrity. And the message of monotheism as an innovation has been to teach the world that we have a reference point. We have an axis about that we analyze ourselves. Nobody's above that. You can't just change the goalposts. That was the message of Abraham, and through the ages, the Jewish people have been a force of innovation on that edge, on that cusp. And innovation does come in waves, you know. If you look back to the wave, like our actual sea wave, you see that it's like impossible to track down. Like if you were to take, get a photographer with like a 60 megapixel camera and he would like to take a picture of a wave. Well, first you might see the base of the ocean. So you say, okay, that's not wave. And maybe 30 meters down under that, that's not wave. And then you'd look up and you'd see like some water, and that would be part of the wave. And at the top, you'd see this kind of like misty foam. It's like where the wave transitions from water to like air vapor, like right at that misty foam. And then above the wave, you'd see like all this little mist popping up that's not even part of the wave, but it used to be. Where did that water come from? The energetic force of the wave, boom, pop that mist hovering above the wave into the water. So there's like many different facets of the wave, and that's just in one freeze frame. If you look at a wave, it's elapsing over time. A wave is not a static thing to be studied and investigated, and that's an artificial sense of analysis. Because if you're doing Tai Chi on the Atlantic Ocean or wherever you're at, breathing for 15 minutes, you see that waves are constants. Waves have been going on for a long time, and it's the brain waves that are picking up of this actual water wave that's in front of me. And the more that you think about it, the more you see that waves are constantly in motion, that we are in waves all the time. So at this point, I want to introduce one element of innovation, which I think is very true and important. And I'm drawing from a field of study called chaos theory. So I can't see anybody's hands, but raise your hand to yourself if you've heard of chaos theory. It's a cool word, chaos. There's a Kabbalist named Reb Shlomo Eliashev, the Leshem. He was the great Gadol Hador, Reb Eliashev of this generation, Yosef Eliashev's grandfather. He lived, I think he died probably close to 100 years ago. He was born in Lithuania, came to Israel. And he wrote an entire book, two-part book, called the Drush Olam HaTohu, the expounding of the world of chaos. And it turns out chaos is a very present factor in the teachings of Kabbalah, but it's also a very present factor in trying to understand the world. It's too vast beyond my expertise and too vast of a field to go to the historiography of chaos study. It was the emergence of different disciplines, people studying fluid dynamics, like how does water simply go around down a drain? How come it's so chaotic? How come we can't predict the weather? How come we can't predict the economies? There's all these different scholars studying in their own domains, and together they all came to this notion in this field of study called chaos. So I want to take a few key learnings from the vast field of chaos to help us understand what innovation is. So one of the biggest teachings of the chaos scholars is that every measurement is a bias. For example, if we look at the sun, now the sun is huge. There's 1.3 million Earths that can fit inside the sun, all right? If we were to be standing in front of one solar flare on the Earth, it would be 5 to 10 times the height of our entire Earth itself, like a solar flare on the surface of the Earth. It's so huge, but now when we look at the, one second here, you guys are still with me. Now when we look at the sun, we see this little ball in Earth, and we can squish it with our hands. It's almost descended into a point of singularity. It's like one dot in the sky. And this is something that 1.3 million Earths could fit in. One flare from the sun is 5 to 10 times the size of the Earth. But now it's just a little ball. Why? Every single measurement is subjective. It's from your vantage point. Let's take the coastline of a recognizable geographic landmass, a nice isthmus. Let's think about Italy. So this is brought in chaos theory that you go look at Italy from above and it looks like that nice boot. You come and you track it there. Great, very nice. We got a boot from space, from Google Maps. It looks like a boot. But what happens if you're on Google Maps and you start zooming in to the boot, to one part of that boot, to Venice, right? And you look at Venice, Italy, and it's a series of islands. And where would you draw the coastline there? Like the coastline is not just this nice, smooth boot area. The coastline is made up of tons of ins and outs and little rivulets and coves. But that's not the end of it. If you actually tried to measure the coastline of Italy, you would find yourself in an amazing predicament because everything is perspective and it's your bias. So if you're a satellite in space looking at Italy, your bias is to see Italy as that nice little boot shape. If your vantage point and your bias of perception is a microscope on the beach of Italy, well, each grain of sand is going to be a whole different world. You're going to see little pieces of rock, little pieces of glass, little pieces of other debris. And if you tried to weave the contours of that and go deeper to the particles within there, you would be even more confounded. And at the subatomic level, everything is pulsing in and out of existence in a spread of quantum possibility. That you cannot measure the coast of Italy. If you're standing at the sun, there is no Italy. You don't see it. You just see the earth. If you're in space at a satellite, you might see a little boot. If you're hovering over above a plane and looking at one small geographic region and city, you can see little ins and outs of the coves. If you go to those coves, you'll see the even more contours. If you're looking at the sand, if you're looking in a microscope, if you're looking at a subatomic view of this coastline, you'll see that there is no objective Italy here, that everything is changing upon where you measure. And I think that's an amazing point of the wave too, because where does that wave start? Where does a social wave start? Where does a wave of a good strand of ideas start, or a good conversation? All of these things where are you going to trace it back to? Where is the origin? There's a teaching in the Torah right at the beginning. It says, Nahar Yotzi Me'edin Lahashkot et Agan, that a river pours forth from Eden to water the garden. Now, we think about the Garden of Eden as like this primordial utopia, the Garden of Eden. But this verse is telling us explicitly, this garden is not in Eden. The garden is the ground of engagement in the analogy. That's where we innovate. That's where we do things. From there, there's a river that is coming out from Eden. Now, what is Eden? What is this place, Eden? And I think this verse is helping us understand the complexity, the holiness, and the beauty of understanding the root of innovation, of understanding the root of the crest of a wave. Because the garden is what we can see. It's what's above ground. It's what we look around and see. But there's a pipeline. There's a river. A river, we use river in the terms of stream of consciousness. So imagine that, just take that. That's a good one, stream of consciousness. Imagine that you hiked upstream your stream of consciousness. Already at our stream of consciousness, we're thinking in terms of words, ideas, frameworks. We're thinking in a given language. I was born in Tucson, Arizona. I think in English. My concepts are modern. I'm a millennial born in 1985. I have a certain vocabulary, conceptual and linguistic, that I'm able to draw from. That's the river that is pouring into my garden, or to help me create my garden. But the verse says, Nahar Yotzi Me'eden, the river pours out of a place called Eden. Now, Eden corresponds to a place called Chachma. You could translate this as wisdom in Kabbalah. And Chachma, if you mix around the letters, because at the height, at the apex of the study of Jewish wisdom, there is a correspondence at the level of the mathematical, you could say, sums or permutations of the letters. So the word Chachma and the word Koach Ma, which I'll tell you what that is in a second, have the same letters and also have the same numerical correlation, numerical value. So they're bearing with them the same meaning. Koach ma in Hebrew means power of what? That if you want to understand what Jewish wisdom is, it's not the ability to take a microscope and measure something. That's really important. We do that. We do that in the garden. We do that above ground. We do that in the entire body of water that constitutes the ocean, right? That's below ground, flipping the analogy. But where things get interesting and where things get on the edge of chaos or of where newness and innovation enters into a system is in the state of not knowing. It's in a state of humbling oneself and letting a force that's greater than measurement, that's greater than rigid analysis flow through us. That is why wisdom is the power of what? Because it's a mind state, not of knowing and conquering and thinking. That's certainly necessary for any creator that knows it requires a lot of thought. But there's another type of mental state that we need to tap into. And that is in Hebrew corresponding to the letter Yud in God's name. So if you think of the Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, the final Vav and Hey are like the scene, the above ground. We can perceive it. But the hidden letters are the Yud and the Hey, the first one. And the Yud, if you look at that, it just hangs up in the air. Where does it come from? Where does it go down to? It's this portal of complete humility. And in Kabbalah, there's an entire span of worlds. The vast majority of our reality, the entire Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos that the Leshem Shabbat Achlama speaks about, is all hidden in the tiny tip at the very, very height of the Yud. That this is the place where innovation, where creativity is hidden and nestled, and no human can get there by normal means. It requires a state of true bittul, of true negating of oneself, getting past the walls of ego and I am conquering, I am so smart, and to let a pulse, let a wave that's coming from a higher, unperceptible source. And you speak to artists who have been in a high flow state of creation, or you might be an artist. Where does that come from? Where does that state where you're suddenly ignited? Where are these ideas pouring in that you didn't have before? It comes not from a state of grasping. It comes from a state of really letting go. And this is the hike to the root of the source of consciousness. This is to try to find the Eden, which is the source where a river of concept and language comes out to then create the world, to then quench the garden that we are creating in. So humility, knowing that there's patterns, that there's waves. When you look out at an ocean, to not get stuck on just thinking about one wave and that one perfect flash, like, captured the 60 megapixel one vision of the wave. That's nice and that's helpful. But the true Chacham, the true wise person, understands that waves are constantly flowing, that there's different sets, that it's elapsing over time. So it brings me to another point of how to understand innovation, is that we have to stay non-local. That when we learn something about sports, about the dynamics of a team, if you've ever been in a high performance team, highly functional sports team, or maybe a team in work, there's a certain dynamic that you unlock there. There's a certain archetype that each person of that team takes. There's a certain unhealthy dynamic where maybe somebody is overbearing and they've squashed the innovation, and then maybe that person lets go, or maybe that person's not there. There's a breakthrough. We can learn so much about the world from local situations, but the true wise person applies that to other systems, other circumstances. So it's not getting lost in one wave. It's understanding the wave as a series of a set of waves, and that set of waves elapsing over various waves of time. Waves where the shoreline will be closer or farther. Waves of whether there'll be human civilization against the coast and not. It's to try to take our local learnings and then to be a true cosmic surfer, to make ourselves non-local, to take that learning and to be able to apply it across the system. And that's what happened in actually the study, the emergent the emergent field of chaos theory, is that people were looking at small microeconomic patterns and weather patterns and fluid dynamics and the stock market, and they were able to humble themselves to get out of their silos and look at these patterns from a non-local area, from a systems perspective. So again, learning number one, stay humble, right? The root of innovation cannot be grasped, cannot be conquered. We can humble ourselves to let it flow through us and then to bring it down through the river into the garden. Learning number two, we've got to stay non-local. We've got to take our local learnings that happen in particular areas of our lives and be big enough to apply them and to see those patterns manifesting elsewhere. Another learning is to hold paradox, right? If you look at the crest of a wave, at the edge of innovation in that, water wave coming and pouring over, there's a place where water and gas, like air, mist, vapor, blends into itself. Like all of the water 30 meters down is clearly water. It's a massive water. But somehow this energy comes and lifts this water up. And that energy creates a crest at the top of the wave. It's a white water where the particles are more agitated. And then at some point, some of those particles of water just decide to leave their state altogether to transform a state of matter from a liquid into a gaseous vapor. And if you really look, and if you were to feel the top of a wave, it's way above where we see. There are water droplets coming out. Those are the early innovators. Those are the early adopters, I should say, of the wave. They have been the ones that have put themselves on the line to come up and crest and transform themselves from water into vapor. So we've got to be able to hold paradox. We've got to be able to hold a state where iterative systems of order meet complete chaos. And on that edge of chaos is where innovation happens, where it's not so ordered and predictable that's just the same thing we've been locked into for 100 years, and it's not completely nonsensical, which is the negative part of chaos, that it could be completely out there beyond any comprehension. There's an edge of chaos, an edge where we have to hold paradoxes together. That is the third learning. Stay humble, stay non-local, and be able to hold paradoxes. And that's going to bring me to the fourth and final learning I want to give here is faith. Any innovator, anybody who's coming to bring novelty in a system that's highly invested in the perpetuation of that system, is going to be ostracized. They're going to be laughed at. They're going to be misunderstood. They're going to be rejected. They're going to feel that they're not worth it. They're going to have self-doubt. And that's normal. That's called the birth pangs of growth. That anytime you're going to bring novelty in the world, there's a certain level of system resistance that a person's going to have to fight against. But the people who are truly committed to that vision, they're truly tapped into that unique aspect that all of us have in us that nobody else can bring to the world. We have to find the inner fortitude, the inner resilience, the inner grit, the inner faith, the inner emunah, to trust in that inner element inside of us, to trust in that vision, to trust in that world that we see that could be better, and to put ourselves out on the line. It's much safer to stay in the mass body of water, 30 meters under. The world's not going to harass you there. It's when you peek your head up, it's when you're trying to be on the edge that you're vulnerable. But that is part of the process. We shouldn't look at that as a bug. That is a feature of innovation, and it requires the tool of faith, of an inner conviction, an inner direction, an inner perspective that is wider than the local circumstance happening in front of us, that is bound to be small-minded and bound to be rejecting us. So summing up here, I've been very inspired by waves as a motif for innovation. The Jewish people, humans in general, are innovators. We're here to create something new. We're here to improve upon the world that we find. We need to do that by finding that edge of innovation. We need to understand that at that edge, it gets crazy, it gets chaotic, it gets non-measurable, and that should help us understand the mindset of humility, of koach ma, the power of what, to at some point stop trying to create and shape and to let go, to let that wave flow through us. Then we can hopefully be humble. We can be non-local, not focused in one area, but be big and broad, applying it everywhere. We can be able to bridge paradox. where two different forms of matter, air and water, meet. That's the edge of chaos. And to have the inner humility and humble conviction, the faith, the trust in ourselves, in our vision to see it through. Thanks a lot. It's been great chatting innovation with you. L'chaim from Israel.